Hello, I'm Andy Agathangelo. I'm proud to be the founder of the Transparency Task Force, which is an international community of people in and connected to the financial services sector. We believe the financial services industry is profoundly important to the well-being of society, to economic stability, to political stability. And we believe that the sector has a great deal of scope for improvement in terms of how it actually operates. What we want and what we believe is that everybody would ultimately benefit if the financial services sector saw its role as being about serving society, as opposed to, for example, just maximizing profit in the short term. So our community of around 2,700 people around the world are on the same wavelength as I am in terms of wanting reform. Our mission is to promote ongoing reform of the financial services sector so that it serves society better. And our vision is about building a truly highly respected international institution that is dedicated to making sure that consumers are treated fairly by the financial services industry. Now, when it comes to the question of, okay, what can you do about actually making change happen? That's a question we think about a great deal. And one of the answers to that particular point is to recognize that what we need is what we describe as a whole system solution to a whole system problem. In other words, there is no one silver bullet that's going to solve all of the finance sector's problems. There are many different things that will contribute to making it the way it ought to be. And one of the most important drivers for change within the financial services sector, we believe, is leadership. We believe good leadership can make a very quick, perhaps even an immediate difference to the way that an organization operates, thinks, behaves. We believe that leadership can impact hugely on the culture of an organization. So having recognized that leadership is particularly important, we've decided to set out on a journey to meet with and speak to people around the world who already have a very well established reputation as being an honest, ethical, principles-based leader. We are especially interested in leaders in financial services who do put principles before profit, who do put morals before money. And these are the individuals that we believe can be held up as a good example to others. And we're especially interested in how they know and how they understand that it's perfectly possible to create a successful commercial organization without having to sacrifice values, ethics, and so on. So we have one of those video interviews about to happen now, and it's going to be conducted by my tremendous colleague, Deborah Henderson. Debbie runs the the Center for Inspired Leadership. She leads that organization, and Debbie's been especially useful and helpful in helping to create this whole initiative. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Debbie, who's going to pick it up from here. Thank you very much, Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And may I just say at the beginning of 2021, what a pleasure it is to work with you and all you are seeking to create with the TTF Transparency Task Force, and have done for the last 6 years in an incredibly dedicated way. So hats off to you. I am delighted to be speaking today with Darrin Williams, CEO of Southern Bank Corp. And we can see the name of the bank just behind him and on his lapel. And this is going to be, I believe, a very interesting example of a leader who does exactly what you were sharing, Andy, and that is running a bank with the purpose of looking at its role in society and all that can be benefiting its people, its constituents, and ultimately society too. Let me share just a tad bit of further background on myself, and then a little background on Darrin, and then I'll open up with some maybe big picture questions and invite you, Darrin, to reflect on the environment we're living in today and where banking fits into that. Darrin is in fact dialing in from Arkansas, and I am dialing in from just outside London. And this is a Canadian accent. did spend 16 years in finance myself, mainly Morgan Stanley and bulge bracket in New York and in London in corporate finance, and then in institutional equity sales. And I would say I had a bit of an epiphany moment towards, after those, I'm just going to change my view so I can see you, Darrin. An epiphany moment as I thought I was getting married and moving to Denver, Colorado to go into asset management. And when that didn't transpire, I pressed pause to go, what is likely to be the most important area in, frankly, that would be of interest to me in my life and where I could be of service going forward for the next half of my life career. And I determined it really was in, as you've said, Andy, leadership. And leadership in particular, ultimately looking at leadership in financial services. And so for the last 22 years, that's what I focused on. And that's why it's a particular delight today to be here interviewing Darrin and having had a chance to speak with you a little earlier, Darrin. So for the audience who will be listening, Darrin, as I mentioned, is calling in from Arkansas, born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and started his leadership journey, we could say, right in high school, not only by being appointed to the school, the consolidation board by Bill Clinton, but then also becoming student president in 1986. He has an extraordinary background that is, after graduating with 2 degrees in law and financial services, to actually decide to spend his first part in politics as, well, we could say politics, as chief of staff for the Attorney General then, looking at politics himself, ultimately becoming a partner in a law firm, and then choosing, when the opportunity came up, though he wasn't quite sure he wanted to take it on, but this is in 2013, to become CEO of Southern Bank Corp, which itself, fascinatingly enough, and I'd love you to share more on the history of the bank, Darrin, was set up, if I'm understanding correctly, some 30 years ago by Bill Clinton and others, philanthropists, with $10 million of funding to be able to serve local communities in a way that potentially the larger banks hadn't been doing. And today, Southern Bank Corp has assets of 1.6 billion, if I'm not mistaken, serving 65,000 people in 45 rural areas in the Mid-South. And it's an extraordinary journey, and your impact on the journey for the bank has been phenomenal. And I'd love you to tell us more of that story. First, have I shared enough of the background that gives you a bit of a platform, and anything further you would like to say on your own background and journey, and we might delve into some of your decisions a little later. But first, anything further you'd like to say on the intro, Darrin, you might wish to amplify on. And secondly, if you could maybe paint a picture of how you see, since this interview is taking place January 2021, how you see both the political scene today and from the standpoint as the CEO of such a bank, what you feel the role of financial institutions are meant to be in this political maelstrom that we're dealing with. And what speaks to you to be so important in creating a healthy culture with your people in the middle of this maelstrom? Thank you.
Sure. First of all, Debbie, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation. I think you've painted a pretty good picture of my background. I might only add one thing to give context to the political question that you had, and that is that I spent 3 terms as an elected official myself. I spent 3 terms representing my legislative district, where I pretty much where I grew up as a kid, and that was an outstanding experience. It gave me a chance to represent people, to really express their interest in our local government, our state legislature, and to work with people across the state. And it kind of gives me a unique view into politics, having always been kind of a political junkie, have been both elected, worked on campaigns, and then worked for not only our Attorney General, as you mentioned as well, but spent some time in Washington, D.C. When Bill Clinton was president, working for the Democratic National Committee as a liaison to his administration at the White House. So the political landscape, what's happening in the United States today, unfortunately, is troubling. It's very troubling to me. The peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next has been kind of the hallmark of our democracy in the United States. And so what we saw just last week, where this violent attempt to deny that ability to have a peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next, it's really troubling. It speaks to just the political divide that we see in America right now. When I served in the Arkansas General Assembly, it was really at the cusp of where our state was turning much more to this divisive type politics. Traditionally, it had really been more of a statesmanship. And so I really enjoyed working across the aisle with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to pass legislation and to promote policy that benefited where I thought everyone. And we did that. But my last term, we started to see, more of this red team versus blue team, as opposed to, being statesmen and stateswomen to doing what's best. And that's what you're seeing. We were really just reflecting what's happening nationally. It took a little longer to get to Arkansas, but nationally for some time now. And there are a number of reasons. I think it's the unfortunate influence of dark money into politics, not knowing where that money comes from and what's the influence behind that money. It's this notion that, that's a zero-sum game. One team has to win, one team has to lose. Inability for people to work together. And so what you see people at the heart, you see people suffering. People are concerned about a number of things. And then in America too, we cannot forget America's original sin of slavery. Race and racism is a cancer that continues to divide this country until we come to grip, until we can really be open and honest and have real honest conversations, dialogue, and even Canada's done a great job, I think, in this healing process. We've got to get to this healing process. So I think what you see happening in America is going to be a sad time in our nation's history. But I'm hopeful that we're at a low point, and I'm hopeful from here we can rise and we can meet the challenge. And I'm appreciative that our democracy stood strong, though. Even after the violent overthrow, our elected leaders worked through the night and certified the electoral votes. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be our president and vice president going forward. And so our democracy stands. And so that's a testament to our democracy. But we've got a lot of work to do, Debbie.
I hear you, and thank you for naming all the elements that are going on. And I feel this is already the backdrop to what could be a very rich conversation, partly understanding your journey and partly mainly understanding what is the role of finance, because you wove in the statement about dark money into politics. What is the role of finance that you see can be an enabler? And I sense that's what you're doing. And yet what you see is the other side of money that can maybe not bring out the best in mankind that works in the sector, which is what Andy has alluded to and what Andy holds as the premise for his sense of purpose of the Transparency Task Force. Why did we get, and how do we get to the point where we don't have transparency, dark money, we don't have the trust, because truth isn't being spoken or whatever? How do you see that money is playing a role in that, and therefore the challenge of leaders in running banks or financial institutions?
Yeah, so Debbie, that's a great question, a complex question. Let me approach it this way, because what I really think a critical issue that we've got to address, particularly in America, across the country, across the world, is income inequality. And I think this pandemic has really shown the structural inequities in our system of the economy, just the way we govern ourselves. And I was looking at our bank we say we are wealth builders for everyone. We focus on that everyone because we believe that regardless of zip code, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of gender, you should have an opportunity to reach the American dream, to live your potential if you're willing to work for it. And so what we unfortunately see in this country right now and across the world, particularly during this pandemic, there's that the system is structurally biased against certain groups of people. And right now, there's a dichotomy between the stock market is at an all-time high, yet we have some of the longest food lines and people who've never found themselves before asking for food assistance all at the same time. So how can it be that so much wealth is being amassed with the very, very wealthy, and we don't have a minimum standard of living for those who need a hand up, not necessarily a handout? And so as that growing wealth continues to divide between people, and it's along geography and it's particularly along race. So for example, in the United States, the average African-American household without durable goods has $1,700. The average Hispanic household has $2,000 compared to $116,000 for the average white household. And that divide continues to grow. That cannot continue to make us a more prosperous nation. If we can bring the bottom up, then think about what that does for the entire economy. And so we need greater transparency in our financial sector, but we also need a financial sector that's designed to serve everyone, and not just the haves, but those who would like to have as well. And I think that's where Southern really plays. And that's why we say we are wealth builders for everyone. We want everyone to have equal access to reaching their American dream.
Beautifully said. Now, what I'm curious about, I know you're part of the Global Alliance for Banking and Values. To lead and have the vision and the sense of mission that you have from where you are and how you have built it up and really take a strong stand. I'd love to, we'll delve a little more into your personal journey on this. It's hard to do it alone. So how do you surround yourself with allies? Let's talk about allies in the outside, especially when we're dealing with this dichotomy of rich and poor, and you're speaking from the pulpit, if you like, on your true stand about what is needed. Where are you finding support and allies in this call that you have, especially in this kind of dichotomy?
Sure. Well, David, that's what gives me real hope for optimism. That keeps me hopeful, because I'm finding a number of partners. I'm finding a number of people across the world who are beginning to think and focus more and more on these issues. And you mentioned one, the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, or GABV. We joined GABV now almost 7 years ago, I guess 6 or 7 years ago. And what an awesome network of like-minded, mission-focused financial institutions, different in many respects. Some banks, some credit cooperatives, credit unions, micro funds, operating in various different countries, under various different regulatory regimes, but all focused on using finance as a tool to deliver a deep societal benefit, and focused on trying to finance the change that we want to see in America, with the ultimate goal of changing the financial sector as a whole. We are small in number, small in asset, but we punch far above our weight. And you're starting to see across the world, people thinking more and more about the role of finance and the role of business. I mean, Andy alluded to this, the role of business. And so I'm finding partners across the country, in the financial sector, as members of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. And that's great. And that's one. And I'll think nationally here in the United States, the Business Roundtable is probably 200 of the largest businesses in America. And in the wake of the unfortunate murder of George Floyd at the hands of the Minnesota police, in last year, the Business Roundtable said enough is enough. They spoke up, and led by their chairman at the time, Doug McMillon, who's CEO of Walmart, they put forth an aggressive platform with 6 pillars. One was finance. And they basically said, we've got to move beyond corporations existing to maximize shareholder value and to accept the role that corporations must play in helping to build a better society. So it's not just about margin, it's also about mission. It's also about doing well. And so we're finding allies in corporate America, some of the biggest businesses in America. And I have had the fortune and pleasure of spending time and talking with Doug McMillon, with Brian Moynihan, the CEO of Bank of America, and with several other members of the Business Roundtable, including executives at Walmart, who are really now thinking very, very seriously about how do they use their platforms and their businesses to advance societal goods. And so that's a different thing, right? 20 years ago, that was not what corporations were talking about. That was not what they're thinking about. So we're finding allies in big corporations, and even in the financial sector. What we're seeing as a part of the Business Roundtable's commitment to advancing racial equity, they are making equity investments. Bank of America made an equity investment in Southern Bancorp, so they are now a shareholder. They had previously made corporate contributions and charitable contributions, and that's great. We love those. But to take an equity position in this bank says, I want to partner with you to advance my goals, but also your goals and societal goals. And so we're finding partners there. And then lastly, the Southern is what's called a Community Development Financial Institution, or a CDFI. And we'll use that acronym a lot. And as a CDFI, we're designated by the United States Department of Treasury, and we're committed to doing at least 60% of our work in low and moderate income census tracts or low and moderate income communities. And we have a network of about 1,100 CDFIs across America, all working with the same mission of providing access to capital, credit, and financial development services to lift people and communities. And so we've got strong partners there. And the world's beginning to pay attention, particularly America's beginning to pay attention to CDFIs, because with this pandemic, we've been filling the gap and helping those who don't have access to big banks, and those who have been able to, who've been really struggling dealing with this pandemic. So I'm proud and excited and optimistic. I'm finding allies internationally, nationally, and then locally as well.
Fantastic. When you look, since you painted such a dramatic picture of the income disparity levels, more than I think most people, and you did it beautifully to be able to indicate truly how extraordinary that shift is. Just to help the audience understand part of what your role might be, we could imagine it's lending only, but I'm wondering if there are other elements that you've started to expand that would be part of, just to give people a sense of what this means that you're providing for the communities, and how you might be brainstorming of different ways to be able to support communities amongst all of these CDFIs in the US, just so we can help others understand all that you might be doing for your communities.
Yeah, so sure, David, we do a lot more than lending. Lending is very important. Access to capital and credit, it's obviously key. Our work really focuses around 3 net worth building strategies. So Pew Charitable Trust years ago did a study, and it said 70% of the people who are born into poverty, they never make it out. It becomes generational. So if your grandmother was poor, your mother's going to be poor, and you're likely to be living in poverty. They looked at 30% of people who actually made it out of poverty. And what was common among that 30% is they had some form of net worth, some cushion that allowed them to move out of poverty. And so that might have been ownership of a home. And a home, of course, when you're paying your home mortgage, it's a forced savings account, right? So you're building equity if your home's in a valuable place. Many people have taken the equity out of that home to start a small business. That small business becomes the financial resource that family moves out of poverty. Some have taken the equity out of that home to help finance their kids' education. And we know how important education is to really lifting people's financial standing. And so our net worth building strategies are around homeownership. And so we seek to help support people in obtaining and sustaining, not just getting, but keeping homeownership. And then we also work around entrepreneurship. And so that's around helping people to start businesses, but also helping to retain businesses. As you mentioned, we work in some very rural communities of less than 1,000 people in some of the towns we're in. And so if that town loses 2 jobs, that's very impactful in that town. And we know that larger banks have moved away from these rural communities. They're not locating, they're going to more densely populated areas to have a much broader customer reach. We want to be there because the further a business is from traditional access to capital and credit, the more costly that credit becomes. And that may be the difference in making that business profitable or not profitable, and making that business cash flow. And then the third thing we do our third goal is around saving, helping people to save and accumulate assets. Now we do that obviously through our products, but what makes us unique, Southern really, we are 3 companies in one. So you've got think of a 3-legged stool. You've got the bank holding company that wholly owns the bank. And then we have a nonprofit financial partner called Southern Bancorp Community Partners, which all 3 are designated as CDFIs. The holding company is a B Corp and a legal benefit corporation. So we have a purpose beyond just making a profit, and it's ingrained in our founding documents. But all 3 of those entities work together on a common mission of lifting people, of being wealth builders for everyone. And so in our policy work, in our savings work, we do a lot around policy. And here's where I get excited, because the former elected official comes out in me. We're not just about, products and services of the bank. We're out actively talking to state and federal elected officials about policies that will advance the opportunity for people who are low wealth to save and accumulate assets and move themselves from poverty. And so we can talk about a number of different programs and things that we do, but I think what's really unique, and actually how I got to know Southern, was as a legislator, working with them on issues that were affecting people in my district, trying to remove very high cost predatory types of businesses from my district. And Southern was partnering with me because they recognized the fact that those high cost financial service providers were stripping wealth from those who were least able to pay. So we work not just in products and services, but also in practice and policy. And so what's unique is we can actually create products and try things in the bank, and then we can actually take that what we've learned, formulate policy, and actually go and try to pass that to have a much broader impact on people. And I'll give you one example, and I'll close this answer. In the state of Arkansas, if you have more than $2,000 in assets, I mean, you're very, very poor, but you only have, well, actually it's going to $2,250. If you have more than $2,250, then you're not able to qualify for government assistance to help for rental assistance or for food assistance. So what this usually looks like is a single mom of 2 or 3 children, very, very low wealth, very, very poor, and she receives assistance to provide a safe, decent, affordable home, as well as food for her children. She can never save and work her way out of poverty, because if she gets to $2,251, someone's going to take her benefits away from her. And so that makes no sense. So 35 states in the United States have removed those asset limits. And Arkansas is not. We're working now hand in hand with a number of businesses to ask our government and our legislators to remove those artificial limits that will not allow people to move out of, it actually traps you on government dependency and not allow you to come out. And so that's just one example of policy that we're working on that may be unusual for a bank to talk about policy, but we're working on because we know if people can save and accumulate assets, they can move up the financial mobility ladder and move on toward finding their American dream.
Wonderful. Now, I'm curious, you stepped in to Southern Bancorp, having got to know it a little bit yourself on the legal front and on the politics side. And Would you say that Southern Bancorp was already in this policy influencing basis then? And did it have the governance model that you've just outlined that feels very powerful with the not-for-profit element? And then if you've been able to build on that, or how much of what you're describing right now, because it feels so fit for purpose given your background, has been developed by you to be able to bring in? I'm curious on the ancestral energy of the genesis of Southern Bancorp on which you're building.
So Debbie, here's what's just so positive and wonderful about this organization. The visionary leaders that started Southern, I say all the time, they were well ahead of themselves. They were right there in the intersect of business having a dual purpose of profits and purpose. They were B Corps before there was a B Corp. And so from the very existence, from the very founding of Southern, they included not just the bank, but they also included these nonprofits and married them together. In fact, there were more than we have now at the very beginning. And so that's been a part of our DNA since our founding. Now, when I got to Southern, even the best of mission-driven organizations sometimes lose their mission or have what I call mission drift. And I think our board and I know many of our team members would say in 2012, 2013, when I came aboard, Southern was still doing really good work and having deep impact in policy and in practice and in products. But we had some mission drift. And we'd gone probably maybe beyond what a financial institution was good at. And we had some internal divisiveness among our three entities. They were not working as well together. And to be quite honest, what you had the for-profit side and the nonprofit side. And the thinking was in the organization that the bank, through its loans and its net interest margin and its profits, made the money and then gave the money to the nonprofit. The nonprofit gave it away. And so the banker said, we want to keep more of the money so we can grow the bank. And the nonprofit said, we want more money so we can do more good stuff. That's not exactly what was happening, but that was perception. So it became reality. And so there was this tension among the sides. And so much credit to our board when they invited me on. And I guess I'll add this as well. This was around the Great Recession, right? And so Southern had taken over $33 million in what many may remember as TARP or bailout funds. The government was putting money into banks to stand them up so they would continue to lend money. Southern was at that time about $500 million in assets. It was in a positive shape. It did not need money because it was failing. It took the money and doubled down and doubled in size. It bought several other banks. And so they went from about $500 million to right under $1 billion, right at $1 billion in assets. The problem with that decision was that TARP money was short-term debt. So we did what we would advise we have wealth advisors that advise our customers, particularly our low wealth customers that work with us. They're certified in their work. We advise them not to make long-term decisions with short-term money, but that's what we did. And so we took short-term debt and made a long-term play. And so when I came aboard, we had this massive $33 million that had a coupon of 2% that was going to go to 9% in 2018. And we had these three entities that were not playing well together. And so, I think a good leader never loses an opportunity to take advantage of a crisis. And so you've got to take advantage of a crisis. So we were in a crisis, and when you're in a crisis, you sometimes have the ability to change more so than when things are going well, right? And people are receptive to that change. So recognizing this crisis point, recognizing that we could make bold changes, we made bold changes then. And so pleased to say that the board gave us time to really make those changes. And I would say the key to what we did is we built a better culture at the organization. And in fact, I have a name tag that doesn't say Darrin Williams CEO. It says Darrin Williams CCO, for Chief Cultural Officer. And if there's one thing I think I brought to the bank is a culture around who we are and why we exist. And I often quote British lecturer and author Simon Sinek. I love his start with why. And I brought that thinking to our organization. I said, let's get back to our why do we exist? If we were founded simply to be a bank, then I think we're missing the mark. When I came aboard, I got a chance to go back and talk to many of the founders of this organization, and they all talked about making a difference, improving people's lives. And so we went back and revisited our mission, vision, values. We created our why, and got everybody in the organization spent a lot of time internally, more than 2 years before we talked about any of this externally. This was not about marketing. This is about branding, internal to branding, living our values. And so we spent a lot of time understanding why we exist, why we may look on the outside like the bank down the street. We are a different type of financial institution. And we say that we believe that wealth building isn't just for the wealthy. We are wealth builders for everyone. That's our why. So we get up every day and go to work to help people build wealth and improve their financial station in life, not about making a profit for this company. It takes profits, no margin, no mission. It's profits with purpose, though.
Wonderful. So, dear Darrin, I'm curious with where I outlined to the audience for this video what your background was, and they might easily be curious how it was that you, who didn't grow up in a bank and parachuted in from the outside with the background you had in law and politics, how did you know as much as you seem to have described to us about building culture? Where did that come from? What was the DNA inside you that had you know how important culture is and what was needed, what you could see that wasn't working and what was needed to bring the mission and the purpose together and alignment and to make most use of a crisis? I mean, this was leadership in the fire hose, if I'm understanding correctly. How did you learn so quickly on the job, or what came from other parts of your background that would be helpful for the audience to understand as to how it was that you intuitively knew what needed to be done and how?
Well, Debbie, I'm not sure I would say intuitively do it. I had a lot of help. We've got a great team of people. And again, the founders and the board are people who are just so mission minded, and they gave me the space to really lead the organization from the point it was at. But I guess Debbie, I'd have to go back to my childhood. I guess it's what I'd have to go back to. I tell people that I have had such a wonderful experience. I was adopted as an infant. My parents adopted me when I was 2 weeks old. My dad was a minister, and he was 55 years old when he adopted a 2-week-old infant. My mom was a school teacher, and she was in her late 40s. Now I'm 52, and I've got a 21 and a 22-year-old. I couldn't imagine having a 2-year-old right now. So you can imagine what special people my parents were. They're both deceased now, but you can imagine what special people they were who would decide to take an infant at their age, and when they should be expecting to soon have grandkids, and then adopt me. And I tell people I hit the parent lottery. If there were a parent lottery, I hit the parent lottery. My dad, again, a minister and a small business owner. I learned more watching his interaction with people, because I grew up. He actually died when I in 1983 when I was in the 9th grade. But I idolized my dad. And I spent a lot of time with him, both at church as well as in his small business. He was a hardworking man. He had a concrete business, so he would actually pour driveways and slabs for homes. And so we'd get up early in the morning when he would let me, and I'd go out and work with him. Most of the time I didn't do a lot of work, but I had fun because I hung around the job site. But I learned a lot of things. But he had people who worked for him. I watched how he interacted with the people that he worked with. I watched how he treated them. I watched him on his lunch break study his Bible, getting ready for Bible class. I watched him make sure that his men got paid before he got paid. I watched him be a bank. He lent money to people all the time. Not everybody paid him back, but he lent money to people, and I saw that. My mom was a school teacher in Arkansas when the schools were segregated by race. So she started her teaching career in the all-Black high school, teaching English teacher. She attended Spelman College, and a predominantly Black, historically Black college in Atlanta, Georgia, female college, #1 historically Black college in America. Graduated from Spelman, went back to her hometown of Menifee, Arkansas, and became a teacher. And I watched how she taught neighborhood kids. I watched how she was not just a mom to me, but I can't think of a time when my family, they adopted a son before me. He's 6 years older than me, so my brother. And they had actually also, when I was about 6 years old, my mother's cousin passed, who had their youngest children were at the time 13, had a set of twins. And so they were taken in by my parents. So I grew up with like having 2 sisters and a brother, none of us biological. And so that's the family I grew up in, a family of love. And every time, my mom was a great cook. You can tell by my size, she was a great cook. But we never ate alone. So she fed everyone in the neighborhood. And she fed friends who would come home from school, and she helped them with homework. And so I saw servant leadership every day. And so, part of this, I must say, was just the fortunate of adoption. That's part of where that came from. It's just to be blessed to have been adopted by some wonderful people.
Okay, so I see you're going back, and thank you, because sometimes it's really helpful when we look at leadership journeys about what the genesis is, where the seeds were originally planted in human beings. And we could say those seeds are challenged. I mean, you wouldn't have felt it necessarily, but the adoption element might have been a bodily challenge, and then to have been received and to have made the most of what you received, of what you had and held. But then I'm curious, is there any other elements during I really sense that you had the bedrock of role model examples, if that's a good turn of phrase, from both father, the pastoral side, the business side, the community side, the spirit side, as well as education, teaching, and huge generosity coming from both your parents, and that yin yang feels as if it worked well in harmony as well. Were you able to apply any elements of this in your sense around culture within the law firm, or within how you saw yourself running campaigns or politics, or in your role as speaker pro tempore, for instance, etc.? Were you able to already such experiment with what cultural elements are that became part of the foundation and platform for you to understand what was needed when you stepped into the CEO role?
Well, I think we all are a collection of our experiences, right? And so I think all those experiences helped to shape how I saw the various roles, including this role as CEO of Southern. What's key there is, and I saw my parents model this, is they were servant leaders. They never asked you to do something they would not do. But more importantly, they asked what you wanted, what your dreams, hopes, and ambitions were. And so, it's always best, if you're trying to build a team, is to understand what people want, as opposed to imposing your will on them. Let's find a common purpose. And so, whether it was as a legislator, or running the Attorney General's office or the law firm, and now even here at Southern, it's been important to me to listen and to figure out what people's hopes, dreams, and aspirations are. And that's kind of what this business of Southern, and I think the financial sector, sometimes we forget. We're so quick to explain our products and services, so quick to explain how you'll benefit from them, before asking you what it is you want, what it is you need. And the law kind of teaches that. So as a law student, you spend time learning the law, studying the law. But the most effective lawyers are not those who can just spit back black letter law. The most effective lawyers, particularly those who are litigators like I was, or even transactional lawyers, they know how to take the law and apply it to a set of facts and circumstances that may be different. And so that's what I saw happening at my house every day. And that's what I saw. That's what I believe was needed, and I think always has been needed in the positions I've been in. I want to know what people want, and let's find a common purpose, and then let's figure out how we can strategize together so we can meet that common purpose. And so that's been key. And I saw there's no politics like Black church politics. Okay, so my dad, I remember when I was very, very young, we had a very small congregation, but this congregation grew to be one of the largest in the state, and that's because he understood people, and he understood how to work with people, and he understood how to get the best of people by being a servant leader, not asking them to do something that he wouldn't do, and finding common purpose and moving toward that common purpose. And so that's kind of what I brought. And even when I came to Southern, I spent a lot of time listening. I spent much more time listening than I did talking. In fact, in building that brand, building that culture that we talked about, I went on a listening tour for several months throughout the organization. I went to almost every one of our locations listening, and I called it a listening tour. And then we went back after we built, one of the unique things we did is we built a brand council. This is where collaboration, this is an important component of leadership, right? It's collaboration. You can't do it you can't do it alone. We put together a brand council, is what we call them. And that's 25 of our 400 plus employees from across the country, from our customer service representatives all the way up to our senior leaders, and 25, and we meet on a quarterly basis. And we talk about the organization. We talk about the culture. We talk about what's happening. They're my soundboard. I can try ideas there, but they also give me great feedback. And they will, and it was interesting, initially when we first started, I said, I want you guys to be completely honest. I want you to tell me, and I think they were skeptical. Now I need to say, I have to tell them, okay, you can quit talking now. I got enough. Now I get great feedback. And so that's been, listening has been important, but collaborating and bringing them in has been important. I think all of those things, are just part of my experiences that have, made me successful. And I saw, I guess the one thing that I haven't mentioned is I saw in both of my parents, people who are willing to work hard, don't take days off. And I can remember when I was a young lawyer in the Attorney General's office, leading at that time the third largest law firm in the state of Arkansas. I was in my late 20s. There were people there who had been practicing law longer than I had been living. The Attorney General was a good friend of mine, Mark Pryor. He was in his mid 30s, so we were both very, very young. I think their organization that we inherited they were probably skeptical of these young guys coming to run this office. And at the time, I moved from Washington, D.C. back home to Little Rock to take this job. And my wife, who's also a lawyer, and my infant child we just had, they stayed in D.C. for a while. So I was home in Arkansas just by myself, living actually in my old house with my mom, just my mom and I, for the first 6 or 8 months until my wife transitioned back to Arkansas. So I didn't have a whole lot to do other than work. And so not intentional, but what I found is I would spend a lot of time during the day working on issues that people wanted. And then in the evening into late at night, I would respond to emails. And so I didn't pay attention to this. This is what people start saying. Like, he's always here. He works hard. So I'm responding to emails at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm a night owl. And they're like, he never goes home. And so I think that helped set a tone that our administration was willing to work hard. And so, someone said that hard work's never killed anybody. And so I don't mind working hard.
Wonderful. So I think we're being able to paint a really helpful picture for our listeners of your background. And I'm curious, as you stepped into the CEO role and brought all of this with you and inherited a group who are willing to give you feedback, or you trained them to be able to give feedback, and you were able to sort of break down what you were perceiving as the tensions. I'm curious if there were any particular man in the moment issues, of a stand you needed to take that would be helpful for the audience to listen to, of a conundrum that you faced, or a real leadership moment where you knew that if you took this decision, it was truly going to be a breakthrough moment as a declaration of what was important, and that where maybe even your soul was wrestling with whatever it was. I'm just curious if, did everything sort of work out very smoothly and it sort of rolled in naturally? I'm just curious, because sometimes those key decisions can be, oh, that's how he did that.
Yeah.
Might be useful.
Yeah, Debbie, I wish I could point to one key decision that was kind of that waterfall moment. I think what I can point to is consistency. I think that has been what's been so powerful for our team at Southern, and what's made us really get to where we are now. And I think there's so much more that we can do. I think we're just scratching the surface. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. So when we were having this listening tour, revisiting our mission, vision, values, and we adopted a strategic vision we called One Southern, One Mission. So we had these three organizations, One Southern, One Mission, to move forward. I went back out on this brand tour, and I explained our vision, our mission, our values to everyone in the organization in these kind of big celebrations. A combination of this strategic planning process that took almost 2 years to do. And as a symbol that we're changing, we're going to do different, we had this giant one, huge one. I should have brought it and put it behind me. And I asked people to join us, to join me on the journey of being wealth builders for everyone. And to signify joining this journey, I want you to sign your name on the one. So we got a big one here in the office, and every employee signed it as their commitment to moving forward with this new vision. And so, but I remember one of those signing sessions, an employee who had been here for some time now, she said to me, she said, "I like what you're saying, but this is we've heard things like this before, and this is marketing, and we'll do this for a few years, and then we'll turn to another marketing program." I said, well, would you do me a favor? I said, would you give me a chance to see if we can't make this stick together? You and I can make this stick. And she actually became a part of our brand council, and she subsequently said to me, "It's sticking because you've been consistent." And so the consistency of messaging and decision making. A couple other things just to talk about how that works. So we were not a legal benefit corporation. We were a C Corp. The lawyer in me tells me that if we're going to tell our shareholders that we're going to focus not on maximizing shareholder value, but focus on both profits and purpose, then I need to make sure that my legal structure will accomplish that. Because you could make a legal argument that if we make a decision that may impact our mission over the long term, that may negatively affect our margin in the short term, that our board might be violating their duty to shareholders if you take that view of maximizing shareholder value. So legally, I wanted to make sure that we could do what we were doing. And why that's important, Debbie, we didn't talk much about this. In my law practice, I was a corporate shareholder derivative litigation lawyer. I sued publicly traded companies for violating their duties to shareholders, and I sued banks for. So I went from suing banks to running a bank. I sued banks for consumer fraud against their customers, and so I wanted to make sure we had the legal framework. That was important to me. It was a couple of years after choosing and changing our legal form that we then were certified as a B Corp and by B Labs, and of course that's a designation by B Labs that you have a double or triple bottom line purpose, and that's an important housekeeping stamp, good housekeeping stamp of approval, but it's not illegal. It's not legal. So it was important for me to get the legal straight, and then we got the good housekeeping stamp of approval from B Corps and B as being a B Corp. and we're proud to be one of just a few B Corp banks in America. And so that consistency, get the legal structure correct, and then making decisions that are consistent with who we say we are as being wealth builders. I'll give you one area that was a challenge to me. We are about lifting people from poverty. We're about financing the good that we want to see. And we had a senior lender, junior lender actually, who called and ultimately got to my leadership team. This was a customer, good customer, a business customer who owned what in America we call strip centers. So it's a real estate development that has several small businesses in them, little grocery stores and various different types of businesses. Our customer owned the entire property and rented space to various tenants. And we had financed that loan for some time now. It's time for that loan to be renewed. One of the tenants in our customer's building, not our customer, one of his customers, was a storefront payday lender. So I don't know a payday lender, for those who are not familiar with a payday lender, in the US, we have these storefront payday lenders where you go in and you write a check and you give it to, typically it's average is $350. They give you write it $400, they give you $350 back. It costs you $50 to do it. And they hold the check for 2 weeks and you come back and pay it off. Well, what happens is you don't have the $350 or the $400 to pay it off in 2 weeks. And so you can go in for another $50, you can roll it over. And what happens, the average payday loan, which is $350, becomes more like $1,100 over 8-10 months. And you've had this outrageous 400% interest rate. And it's just egregious. And unfortunately, in the state of Mississippi, where we work, there are more storefront payday lenders than there are McDonald's, Burger King, and Starbucks combined. So they're everywhere. We have more of them than we have banks in the markets we serve. And so in this strip center was a payday lender. And our lender, this is just recently, our lender says, can I make this loan because our customer does business with a payday lender? And I was like, wow, that's a good question, because that's not our customer. And we can't necessarily tell that customer who to rent to, but we are indirectly promoting what we're trying to stop. And that was a tough moment, a tough decision, because we didn't have full exposure to our entire indirect impacts on our portfolio. I couldn't say no. We couldn't do that loan. We did the loan. But then we have now begun to work on an exclusionary list, which we didn't have before, of those types of things, situations that we won't do and going forward. So that was a time where probably wasn't the answer I wanted, but I had to be transparent that we don't have a good system to make that decision like I'd like to make it, because I'm not sure what else is in the portfolio that has indirect benefits, indirect impacts. And so I think consistency, and transparency have been important, much more than just this one moment in time that really made a difference.
Wow, that's such a powerful example, but also really powerful to be looking at your awareness through all of your background of how important it is one aligns the structure with the deemed policies, purpose, principles you're wanting to deliver
Absolutely.
on. Because if you don't have the right structure, it'll bite you.
Absolutely.
And you can't then be consistent. And so you saw each time along the way where there was going to be something that would be a hiccup to keep that consistency. And then you went back to brass tacks and restructured accordingly to be able to create the base.
Right.
But isn't that a really interesting element that we could address for business today, let alone for most financial institutions today, the structure that we currently have, which tends to look at shareholders? And how do we then, if we're starting to take this interview into a place of, you've given us beautiful insights of how you run. I could ask a lot more questions on, that I might go to in a minute, on how often you meet with your board and your key leaders to keep the culture alive and ensure everybody is that we're attentive to everybody's personal growth journeys, especially in this time of pandemic, where people will be potentially, their structures are being uprooted or dislodged. How do we support their individual structures? So that's one question I have. And then the other question is, how would we look at the future of being able to support organizations, and maybe GABV addresses this, or other big entities address, how do we align structure with purpose? Maybe, do you want to address your handling of the impact of the pandemic on keeping the culture of Southern Bancorp alive? And I'll come to the future question or the community question in a minute.
Yes, so culture is so very, very important. And during this pandemic, it's been challenging because we're not together as we usually have been. So since March 17th of 2020, our branch lobbies, our bank lobbies have been closed. We've done all our work through drive-throughs in our branches. Even the corporate office where I'm working, it's about 30,000 square feet. There are less than 10 of us here. Most of our team who can work remotely are working remotely. That's also a part of the culture, because what we said is our number one asset are our people. And so we want to make sure, do all we can to follow the science and do what's necessary to keep you safe. And so we quickly implemented a rotation system to make sure that we were providing, social distancing, keeping as few people as necessary in the branches. And I think that speaks to our culture of, we care about you and you're important. Then also making sure we have the technology available for you to work as effectively remotely as you can from home. And that, that goes to that we've got some great team members here and foresight. Nobody could foresee this pandemic, but our operations team, and they actually had transitioned the type of computer units that we have. They're very, very small, so our team members can pick up a little box and their keyboard and monitor and move it and plug it at home. And we've got the technology necessary to make sure things stay safe. And so we were fortunate there. And so we could quickly transition those who could go home. So taking care of our people, that was very, very, very important for us in this pandemic, making sure that they were our first priority. Then our customers were, closely behind that. And it's been probably frustrating for some of them, because particularly in rural markets, people actually go to the bank. Not even though we have an aggressive mobile and online platform, they like to go to the bank. It becomes social in rural communities. And so we will, with an appointment, with a mask and with temperature checks, we'll, you can get in the building, but making sure that our people, we were safe. That's what we did first. Another thing that we moved as to is we have these what we call RAISE meetings. So our core values, they spell out the word RAISE. So it's relationship, accountability, innovation, sustainability, and empowerment. Those are our 5 core values. And to build those values and to assure people living those values, we've got a little core values game. We call it the Raise Reward Program. And if you see one of your team members across the organization, if you see one of your team members that's going above and beyond to live one of our core values, you can nominate that person for a Raise Award. So if you see somebody demonstrating, above and beyond in relationship, you can nominate that person to receive an R for relationship. And it's we've got a little Scrabble towel, and it's a little block with an R on it. And the goal is to spell out RAISE throughout the year. And every time you get a nomination for a Scrabble block, you get a $25 award. And because savings is important to us, if you will hold that and save it at the end of the year, we'll double it to 50. And we've got a budget for that. And so when different markets do it differently, we do it here in my market every month. We have Raise Reward programs. And so every month I get to go and read out everyone who's gotten a Raise Reward. But I don't just say, hey, Debbie got an R. I said, Debbie got an R, and here's what she got it for. She displayed this behavior.
Wow.
And so now now people are hearing the behavior that gets you an award, and it's reinforcing that this is the kind of behavior that we want to take place in the organization. So we moved that, it's important to have collective celebrations. That's a collective celebration. It used to be in person. Now we do it by Zoom. And so we all get on a Zoom, and we, this last week, this Monday, we had 14 Raise Awards, probably because we had missed a meeting or two. We had 14 Raise Awards where we celebrated people going above and beyond, living our mission. Our office, the office I'm sitting in now, we actually sold our corporate headquarters and moved to a temporary location during the pandemic. And so we've had a team of people who've been, including my my assistant, who've been just masterful in making sure we didn't lose a beat, we didn't miss a beat. And not only were we moving to a new location, some people were moving, remotely. And so we did all this during the pandemic, and there were just some superstars that went above and beyond, were accountable to their team members, and made it happen. So that's just an example of, moving that celebration to Zoom. And then the last thing is, in 2017, when I got here, Debbie, there was one of our team members in marketing kept saying, we need to get everybody together because we're spread out over actually 49 locations. We're hundreds of miles away. We need to get everybody together and in one place to hear, about our why and hear our message. And I agree with that, but I want to make sure we do it when we're ready. And so in 2017, we did it. And we brought everybody together over a Sunday, Monday. That Monday happened to be a bank holiday, so we were closed. So people drove, or we bussed them in to one location, stayed overnight, we had a big party Sunday night, and then had a fun educational program talking about our future and talking about why we exist. It went over like gangbusters. People loved it. And
how many were you?
Almost 400. But we also included all three of our boards. Each entity has its own board. So we included all board members as well. So we had well over 400 people. And I can't tell you how impactful that meeting was, that team building meeting, to build the culture that we want to. Because understand, David, you had people who were doing the same jobs who talked to each other on the phone who had never met. They worked 500 miles apart and never met. They talked on the phone. And so we had games where you actually had to go meet the person. We did things to make you collaborate. And we had a powerful session at the end where everyone in your own team had a piece of a puzzle that you put together. Then you took your puzzle and you put it on the wall, and the whole puzzle came together with a big one. One Southern. Everybody and everybody's name was on the one. Going back, drawing on what we did when you signed the one. So it's basically a picture of that one. And so everybody come together. Each individual piece had to come together to make this. And so that was the symbolism. And so it was a powerful time. So much so that new people to the organization post 2017, they all hear about Rendezvous 2017. So you've got these people who are pre and people who are post. And so they were all excited. We were going to have Rendezvous 2020. And it was going to be another all companies celebration and bringing everyone together. Of course, we couldn't do that during the pandemic. And so we were extremely disappointed. But our communications and marketing team unbelievably shifted, and we moved it to a virtual platform. And it was powerful. It was both pre-recorded videos, and then I kind of moderated the entire session live. And people watched at their home over streaming, or some got together in the office, those who were in the office and watched it. We shut our branch banks down early, so you didn't have to take time off work. You did it during the day. And I'll tell you what, a powerful example of living your values from our board. And this was the biggest hit of this convening in October of last year. I told you that we focus on homeownership, on entrepreneurship, and on savings. We call those our big, hairy, audacious goals. We've got metrics around what we want to do in that regard. At this big celebration, our board allowed me to announce that we were implementing a 1% home ownership plan for our team members. So you work at Southern, full-time employee, been there longer than 2 years, you can get a home mortgage for 1% interest rate.
Wow.
And you're talking about living your values. And we value homeownership. We think that makes you build wealth. So our board said, let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's help our employees build their wealth, because we have 4 groups of stakeholders. We have our shareholders, yes. We have our customers, yes, and our communities, but also our employees. And if our employees are not able to benefit from our wealth building strategies, then they're not going to buy in. So they're buying in. And so I was getting calls while I'm announcing this, text message from colleagues around the organization who's watching the stream, saying they're crying at my branch. They're so excited. They're happy. That's an example of living your values.
Wow. But how wonderful that even if some of this was being done on a one-way basis, that you were then able to get the feedback as to what was going on emotionally, that would have really meant, I could feel how much it would have meant to you. Yeah,
and we had my brand council members stationed at different locations, taking pictures, taking videos. And so that's all going to be compiled again into some footage somewhere.
Fantastic. Now, I can see Andy's come on, and we're reaching close to the end of the time. I have a couple more questions, Andy, to be asking of Darrin. If Darrin has time, we have time, do we, Andy? Sure. You do too? Okay, wonderful. So I'm curious, just to help our audience also recognize, you've spoken about culture in the appreciation. You've talked about culture in terms of feedback to you. You've talked about culture in terms of the listening and galvanizing the energy to be able to come up with the mission and the big why, and to constantly bring that out, and the consistency element. Where do you keep leadership energy alive? How often do you meet with your board? How often do you support leadership energy conversations with your board so they can support you with your exco or your top leadership team? How do you support them to keep their leadership humming, alive and congruent and consistent? I'm just curious how those conversations happen and how you align around that.
Yeah, so we've got a real regular cadence to my direct reports, our leadership meetings, and then I'll talk about the board. So we adopted some time ago, probably more than 5 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, this principle called Traction by Gino Wickman. It's an entrepreneurial operating system on how to run an entrepreneurial business. And we actually have a Traction consultant who meets with us, my leadership team, 4 times a year to make sure we're on pace. And so in this, and the book's probably behind me on my bookshelf, is Traction. In this process, it's all really about building a team that is highly trustful, that highly functional, and willing to enter the conflict if there's willing to be open, honest, and transparent. And so we meet weekly for 1.5 hours. And we got a standard. The meeting happens the same way every time. There's a script to what we do. And so what we do is we have each quarter, each one of my direct reports and myself, we make what we call rocks, our 90-day goals. How do you want to eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So we break our goals, our company goals, which come from the company, down to 90-day rocks. And we have we have company rocks and personal rocks. And someone's assigned to those company rocks. Not that that means they're going to have to do it, but they're the person driving facilitating that. And we meet our meeting, and those who are familiar with Traction, you start off with a check-in. It's from the previous week. It's a business best and a personal best. I want to know what happened last week that was good personally, what happened good that was professionally. Real quick, that takes just a few seconds. And then we do a rock review, and you give me a percentage of how far you are on completing that rock. And so, if after several weeks that rock hadn't moved and we're almost at the end of the quarter and you're still sitting at 5%, well, that's a problem. We've probably talked to you before that, but we're saying, what help do you need to move that rock forward? Are you on track or are you off track? And that's the rock reviews. I'm on track, I'm off track. If off track, the question is, what can I do to help? And you don't talk about it right then. You drop it down to the issues list. And so it's meetings all about getting down, building issues. And then we just go through, identify, discuss, and solve issues until we reach our time period. We rate our meeting. After every meeting, we give a rating 1 through 10, if it was an effective meeting or not. And if you give it lower than an 8, you got to tell me why it was not effective, because we want to remove that ineffectiveness out of the meeting. So that's our traction system. We do that on Monday mornings, starting from 10 to 11:30 every Monday morning. And then on a quarterly basis, we meet with our consultant for a full day meeting, and we review the quarter that way. And then at the end of the year, we have an end of the year meeting to review the entire year. And so that's the system that I work with my team. So we meet often, and it's a small group. There are only 5 or 6 of us total. And so we meet and we talk every week. And so everyone knows what's happening. It's very transparent, very open, very honest discussions. And we're willing to enter the conflict when necessary. Now, my boards, there are 3 boards. And so some are regulatory. The bank board meets once per month. And that's largely because they've got some regulatory things they have to do. The holding company board really oversees the organization. And we meet on a quarterly basis. But we have an executive team made up of the chairs of the 3 boards and the key committees that I meet with on a quarterly basis or on call whenever they need me or I need them. And so they're readily available. I've got a chairman in Dr. Glenn Jones, who's our chairman, who is readily accessible. And it's that relationship is very, 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 very important, that we have a very positive relationship. And we will text and talk throughout the week. And when I need to pull them together, we'll do that. So we've got a pretty regular cadence. And I think that's important. So we have maintained transparency and there are no surprises to anyone.
Wonderful. And when you said you have a consultant once a month with your direct reports, is that
once a quarter? Once a quarter,
rather. Is that to look at the culture and look at how the team dynamics work and support people on their individual leadership or collectively or peer feedback, or how does that?
Yeah, so this consultant is trained in the traction or the EOS system. And so we brought him on to help make sure we were being true to the way the system works. And Debbie, honestly, he said to me, "You guys do this well. You don't need me anymore." And I have, as the leader, said, "No, I want you, because if you're not here, then I'm leading that quarterly meeting and I'm not participating like I'd like to participate. It's okay for me to lead the weekly meetings, but I want to be fully engaged and a participant on a quarterly and an annual basis. So I want someone else." And then that outside perspective, he does this for a lot of business. He has a perspective that not every week, but once a quarter we bring him in. And he's now been with us for 4 years, because we started this system without a consultant. And I could tell that it's just not going like it should go. And so then I brought in the EOS consultant, and he's trained and certified in this method. And so now we meet with him on a quarterly basis, but it allows me to be fully engaged as a participant, not kind of leading it.
I'd like to just zero in on this, because I think this is really key and very, very often an element that you've highlighted that many leaders may not necessarily see, and that is how challenging it can be to have a leader hat on while also seeking to be a facilitator, while also seeking to be a participant, because you ultimately are holding the 3 roles. And with the leader hat, you have accountability for how the meeting goes. You have a certain level of authority, but it's really hard to be the listener, and it's really hard to be the collaborator if you don't have somebody else engaging and holding the container and the process. Whereas if you can delegate the process to somebody outside who's got no vested interest other than to support you to have the best process, and you can then take off your leader hat so you become collaborative, it's an unbelievably powerful process, because people know you've just taken off that leader hat temporarily to become the collaborator, and you then go to put it back on to become you're not abdicating your responsibilities, you're delegating process while still holding accountability for the meeting itself. And then you put your leader hat on for both inspiration and authority ultimately, but you don't run the risk of incongruence. It's really powerful.
It's very powerful. You said it beautifully. That's exactly right. And that's exactly the reason that I would not let our consultant go. It's well worth the resources that we spend to have him. Exactly right.
It's a very useful, lovely to hear you describe how you've owned that and recognize it so beautifully for those ongoing meetings. It feels like a really lovely end point. And the only other thought I'd had was whether you are feeling in your own, you've been so gorgeous in offering all this time to us to share with other leaders, and whether you are feeling that other leaders are picking this up, that you're feeling some hope we're going to find some shifts that could happen in the industry overall. I know we spoke about support, and I think just now it is leaving the sense of, I suppose you have given us a sense of the support with Walmart, Bank of America providing equity, and others I expect being in the inquiry phase of how can we support society in a better way. And it feels as if the finance industry, if they could follow your example, we'd all be ahead of the curve right now, is what I'm feeling.
Yeah, no, we are, because of what I say, we have in America right now, we're battling two viruses: the virus of racism that was highlighted with George Floyd's murder, and this pandemic, the coronavirus. Those things have collectively really almost made an X-ray of America, of this inequity and the inequalities that we see among various groups of people. And I think we now all sense that if we don't solve these big problems, then we're going to have a problem, a bigger problem. And I'm really pleased with the way that the government sector, the philanthropic sector, and now even more so the corporate sector, they are not just saying the right things, they're beginning to do the right things. Now, here's the real question. The real question is, will it be sustained? True leadership is about sustainability of your influence. Anyone can lead for a day, but can you lead over time? And so the sustainability of this influence is really going to determine whether we move to a better place. And so let's see if we can't sustain this. We can't let, when this pandemic subsides, and we have a vaccine, we can't go back to normal. We've got to make sure that we continue to address these inequities that we see in the world, and financial leaders have got to understand that so much of this is really rooted in a financial divide between the haves and have-nots. And our role as financial leaders should be to empower people to live their best selves, to be financially inclusive. I say that I am an advocate promoter of financial inclusion. And so we'll see. I'm optimistic that this will last, but it will take true leadership at all levels. And it will take this shift from maximizing shareholder value to understanding the whole impact. And I'll tell you, we've not talked much about it, and I know we don't have time now, but for us as a rural community bank, we have not paid enough attention to the environment. We're beginning to spend a whole lot more time talking about the environment. We have a goal this year of reducing our own carbon footprint, and we're developing a metric system by which we measure the carbon output of our loan portfolio. I want to know what I'm financing. I want to know what I'm financing, how is it harming the planet that we live in? It's profits, it's people, but it's also planet. And so, it feels like, at least in America, that we've adopted, corporations have gone beyond, some have gone beyond profits and understand the societal benefits. That next step is going to be, let's protect this planet that we live on. That's going to be the next step.
Well said, dear Darrin, well said. I feel there is a sequel to this interview. It feels as if the world is changing at such a rapid rate that we could almost speak with you in a few months and find out what are you feeling and seeing and sensing is needed now. And in particular, this is a wonderful statement about the role and responsibility ultimately for all of us, but in particular, when we look at the role of money and finance on our biodiversity and our current challenge with regards to our footprint, and how can financial institutions such as your own start looking at exactly that and be the role model for others as well. Thank you so much for truly being an absolutely inspirational sharer of everything and that you live for, and your journey to get to where you are, and the vision that you see that's still needed. I take my hat off to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Andy. Enjoyed being with you all.
That's been really great, folks. That really has. It's been wonderful for me to sit back and listen to that conversation. Debbie, thank you so much for facilitating it as well as you did. I thought that was a great dialogue. And Darrin, thank you very much indeed for sharing with us not just what you currently do, but also talking about your political background and also tapping into your childhood experiences, which obviously were very, very important and very significant to you. Darrin, listening to you speak, a few things come across so obviously, so obviously. You're clearly a very, very authentic man. You clearly do believe and feel what you feel. You've been talking about things that really do matter to you. And I think I'm right in saying, Darrin, that the strap line for Southern Bancorp is that it's a bank on a mission. And what comes across loud and clear listening to you speak, sir, is that you very much are a man on a mission. And that comes across loud and clear. And I have a question to put to you, because I guess we can think of the entire financial services sector, and we could quite simply split it into three groups. There are a few, but thankfully a growing number of organizations that are being led by leaders that are on the kind of wavelength that you are on. Yeah, they understand the idea of putting principles before profits, and they understand the idea of running an organization so that it truly serves society. In your case, the particular local community, especially so. At the other end of the scale, there are organizations that are so culturally far away from that, that frankly, you wouldn't kind of write them off, but it's going to take so much to make a real difference. But between those two extremes, there's a group in the middle with the right kind of, I guess, encouragement, the right kind of influence, the right kind of direction, could actually quite quickly become a bit more like the first group that I mentioned. Right. And I want to tap into a particular point with you, if I may, Darrin, because I find this so interesting. I'm sure you agree with me that when you're doing something which is more like being on a mission than just doing a job, it feels different. It really does feel different inside. It doesn't always feel like work, for example. Yeah, it feels much more energized than that, much more purposeful than that, much more important than that. And I'd like to, if I may, ask you to wonder what you would say to a leader who is kind of in another organization that's kind of toying with the idea of becoming more purposeful and becoming more mission-led. What would you say to that man or that woman about what it feels like to go to work and lead an organization with a sense of virtue and purposefulness and authenticity and integrity? What does it feel like? How would you describe to them what it feels like to lead the way that you lead, Darrin?
You know, so Andy, the best way I could describe it is it does not feel like a job. It really doesn't. And I have been fortunate in a few of my jobs, or when I get up and go to work in the morning, I'm actually excited and looking forward to being there. And it's not simply about a paycheck. It's really about the work that we're doing. And so, you know, for the during this pandemic, both of my children are in college, and they have been going to school remotely. So they've moved back home. They've moved out of the dorm, or one out of the dorm, one out of the apartment at their college, and they're back home. House feels a lot smaller in that age now, with that many adults in the house. But my daughter, who now the school has not started back, she's in her senior year at Spelman College, and she's been coming, since there's very few people at the office, she's been coming to the office with me every day. And she's been studying. She wants to be a dentist. She's been studying for the dental school admission exam. And so she comes here and she works like it's a job, and we'll get to go to lunch together. So that's a beautiful, there are some things about the pandemic have been good. I've getting to spend a lot more time with my children at this age I probably wouldn't have. Yeah. But she came in yesterday, Andy, about 5:45. And she laid on my couch. And I was talking to someone who this was a young African-American female cosmetologist.
Wow.
Who suffering the effects of the pandemic because, you know, they had to close their business down because social distancing, and she is the chief operating officer of a barber's college. So she and her colleagues own the college of two guys and a young lady. Never met them, but I'm guessing they're probably in their 30s. But I got to know them last year because we did when the government rolled out the Paycheck Protection Program, the CARES Act had funding for small businesses that had to keep their employees employed. And so we did 1,385 Paycheck Protection Program loans through Southern, $112 million. And that actually helped keep people on the payroll. So that feels good right there because people could buy groceries they could eat. I'm giving you a long answer, but there's a point here. She was friends with a young man who's a lawyer in town who was a little brother to me. I mentored him as a young college student. Then he went to law school, and now he's a partner. And now he's actually just got elected to be city director. He's a city director, and he gets his hair cut at their barbershop. And she has a relationship with a big bank. She has a cosmetology degree, so she's been in school, not 4 years at university, but she's been in school. She was searching, trying to understand how to access these government resources that her tax dollars are paying for, but she couldn't reach anybody. And the bank she talked to, she couldn't talk to anybody. She couldn't get there. She was just frustrated. And he asked me, would I help? And I was like, sure. So I said, just tell her, call my cell number. And we were able to help her. And she was so thankful and appreciative because she said, nobody else, and my daughter heard this, she said, nobody else would talk to me, nobody else would help me. And if I hadn't gotten these resources, I'm not sure how we would have made it. Yeah. And so when you can, and I can replicate that story, 2 or 3 times a week, but when you have stories like that, you know that you have helped provide food for her family in a program that her tax dollars paid for that nobody would give her access to because she's not a big customer. You feel good about that. So if you can find the sweet spot of a mission-focused career that marries with the mission that you live, boy, you're in a sweet spot. You're in a sweet spot.
Yeah, wonderful. That's such a powerful answer. It really is fantastic to hear you speak, Darrin. We have an initiative underway. The idea behind the initiative is the belief that people can spark off each other, people can energize each other. Sometimes you can make 1 and 1 add up to more than 2. This idea of synergy and leveraging each other's enthusiasm. So the idea we have, Darrin, very simply is what we call the International League of Ethical Financial Services Leaders. Oh. So it's basically the idea of creating a global network of good people who have a position of leadership and influence in the financial services sector to work collaboratively to try to make a collective positive difference. Now, typically, these are individuals who, even on their own, are making a difference because of who they are, how they work, and how they think. And you're a really good example of this. But we believe that collectively, we can organize, we can strategize, we can mobilize. And we would love the opportunity to have you consider, I'm not going to put the question to you now because I don't know what your answer is going to be, but I would love you, sir, to consider becoming involved with what we're trying to do, because from our point of view, you're clearly somebody that would fit in so well to that.
I'd love to have more information. Is there something you can send me to?
Yeah, absolutely. We will most definitely follow up on that. You bet it. You bet we will.
I would love to. No, I truly believe that 1 and 1 can actually equal more than 2, and I agree with that. And I can say just what's powerful about the GABV is the network of CEOs. We have what we call need time, where we really talk and collaborate and share. And it's been amazing to me that though we operate in different countries and different regulatory regimes, I've learned so much from my colleagues in the GABV that I can apply here, and that I've brought back here. So I would love that. I'd love to learn more about it. Absolutely.
That's great. And finally, you said something that really got my attention. You're the Chief Culture Officer for the organization, and we understand, we completely understand, Darrin, what it takes for an organization to realize the importance of the CEO to wear a badge like that. So you are really very much on our wavelength. We've got various activities coming up about leadership, about culture. We'd love to perhaps invite you to come and speak to groups of our people through one of the symposia we run, but we'll follow up on that in due course. But in the meantime, may I just most sincerely thank you for your participation in today's session, and of course to Debbie as well. Debbie, thank you very much. Darrin, thank you very much as well. Wonderful.
Thank you, Debbie. Andy, thank you.